Best album since Painkiller, Judas Priest, Invincible Shield. I'm here to talk about it next here on the Metal Command Podcast.
You are listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Back here on the Metal Command Podcast, Tony here with you, and I'm really excited to talk about Invincible Shield by Judas Priest. Brand new album, just came out. And I'm going to talk a lot about this record. I'm going to give you my opinion of it. I'm going to talk about your reactions to the album. And I'm going to make some comparisons towards the end of this particular episode. So let's talk about this record, start to finish. Number one, it's album of the month for March 2024. I mean, it's album of the month. No question. For me, it's a top 5 Judas Priest album. Now, my top 5 albums by Judas Priest: Painkiller, Defenders of the Faith, Screaming for Vengeance, Killing Machine, also known as Hellbent for Leather, and now Invincible Shield. Top 5 album. For a band to do this late in their career, make a record this good, it's not normal. I wish every band would do that, like Saxon does it. Some of the other legacy bands do it, but Judas Priest just took it to the next level on the last 2 albums they have put out. Now, folks, you know I have been pretty critical about Judas Priest over a variety of things. I didn't like the way that they handled their Rock Hall ceremony, not even giving any kind of acknowledgement to Ripper Owens and how they've kind of erased his existence in the band in a sense. I thought that was classless. However, I got to give credit where credit is due, folks. They put out a phenomenal record. And it's interesting, they basically reinvented themselves and invigorated themselves in a sense. Because, if you look at Firepower, if you look at the albums that immediately preceded it, Redeemer of Souls, Nostradamus, and Angel of Retribution, those 3 records, they are either bad or mediocre. Angel of Retribution had a couple of songs I really liked, but it had a weak production, and as a whole, I really didn't care for the album. Nostradamus was terrible, and then you had Redeemer of Souls, which had a terrible production on it. The songs were decent, but it was not up to par to what Judas Priest had done in the late 70s, throughout the 80s, and obviously through Painkiller. I thought Jugulator was also a very good album by them. Demolition, not so much. So now we go and they have Firepower. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that was kind of like the resurgence for them. Because they did a bunch of stuff right. First of all, you went and ended up getting Andy Sneap. Now, he obviously tours. He's the other guitar player that tours with the band. But getting him involved as the guy producing the record and mixing the album was huge. And then the other thing they did was bring in Tom Allom. Tom Allom, of course, produced their albums, Judas Priest albums, throughout the 80s for the most part, throughout their peak, or what people viewed them as their peak. And obviously bringing Tom Allom in, he knows what works for that band. Now, is there anything new or groundbreaking that Judas Priest hasn't done before on this album? Absolutely not. But it is the classic Judas Priest sound, the way we all would like them to sound. And you could still not do anything brand new or groundbreaking and still write great songs. And that is exactly what they did on this album. And folks, can we start giving Richie Faulkner some more props now? I mean, here's a guy that comes in, he replaces KK Downing, and you have people that are like, oh, it's only 2 original members because Glenn doesn't tour. Folks, I don't care who the original members are left in this band. If it's just Rob and Ian Hill, I listen to music to tell you whether I like it or not. And not only do I like this, I love this record. And it is an album of the year candidate for sure. A 10 out of 10 album, an album of the month for March of 2024. Again, folks, I recommend getting the exclusive edition at Target. If you are here in the USA, 3 extra bonus tracks are just as good as anything on the album. Now, when I did an earlier episode a while back and talked about these songs that they had released as singles, my opinion was I thought this would be better than Firepower and could possibly be one of the better albums they have put out. Folks, it exceeded those expectations. I mean, I thought it would be a little bit better than Firepower. I like it a lot better. And I also anticipated that this album would probably be better than Firepower, in my opinion, because they knew what worked on that record, and they are going to take what they learned and everything they did to the next level. And it's also Andy Sneap having one album under his belt, producing that album with them. Anything that they wanted to change or do differently for this record, or any songs that the band may have wanted to write differently, was going to happen on the second album. And second album meaning the follow-up to Firepower. I love the album. I mean, it is the classic Priest sound that we all love, that we all wanted, and it is fantastic. The thing that's crazy, so I'm always critical of bands when they release singles, because I come out and say, okay, I go and listen to the album, and like the 2 or 3 songs they put out, I'm like, man, those are the worst songs in the album. How could they be singles? The thing about this Judas Priest album is this. Every single one of these songs is equally as awesome. It is equally as great as the rest of the album is equally as great as the singles. The singles are great. So they did a phenomenal job with the recording of this album, with the marketing of this album, and of course, the songwriting. Favorite songs on the album. This is actually difficult. People were asking me, I'm like, people are like, what is your favorite song in the album? It's hard to say. Like, I'm looking at the track listing right now. Obviously, the first single, Panic Attack, which is the first song in the album, is phenomenal. I love the song Gates of Hell. Giants in the Sky, Sons of Thunder. And some of these are probably bonus tracks. I don't know what the actual regular track listing is, because the promo that I ended up getting had the 3 extra songs, and the physical copy I bought from Target has the 3 extra songs. But man, I think Trial by Fire would be probably my least favorite. But there really isn't a bad track on this. It's the classic Priest sound we all love. And I can't say enough about it. As far as your reactions go, fan reactions. So obviously, as many of you know, I will post on the Facebook page, and I will ask what all of you think of this album. And I would say a clear, 99% of you love this record. 99% of you pretty much love the album, or think it's at least very good. And that does not surprise me. The Bruce Dickinson solo album sort of surprised me when I posted about that. But this Judas Priest album, pretty much universally, everybody loves it. Even looking at other, sites and social media and looking at comments, everybody loves it. And honestly, folks, if you're, the only people that are hating on it are people that are closed-minded, who say things like, oh, there's only 2 original members. Because they don't think Glenn has anything to do with the album because he doesn't tour. And they write it off. I mean, I'm talking about a very small minority, okay, of people that have said anything negative. And then, of course, you have the KK Downing and Ripper fanboys who are automatically going to hate it because they are pissed off with how the band has treated both of those guys. And again, I get why they think the way they do, because I agree with them. But there are a lot of those people, some of those people, not all of them, but just some of those people are actually out there bashing the record. But I'd say 99% of you love it. And speaking of Ripper and KK Downing, a lot of people are trying to compare this album to other Priest albums and, you know, other albums that are coming out. But the reality is, the real comparison, pretty much most people usually want to talk about, that for whatever reason a lot of people don't want to talk about, is comparing this to the last KK's Priest album. Because I went on the Facebook page and I went and posed the question, which album do you like better? Now, personally, I like the KK's Priest album better. Just a little bit. I think the production sounds a little better. I think even though Rob Halford sounds flat out amazing on this newest Judas Priest album, Invincible Shield, I think Ripper just knocked it out of the park. I think Ripper, I give him the edge over Rob these days. Obviously. But both of the albums are great. So when I went and I put the question together for everybody, which one do you like better? It's about 50-50. Down the middle. And you know what the best part about that was? The reason I was asking that? A majority of people, a clear majority of people, said they loved both of the albums. And that is what is so great about that. Because now there are two bands making great albums. You got Priest making their new album and making it as awesome as they did. And you have KK's Priest putting out a tremendous album as well. Album of the year, of course, on the Metal Command show. But it was pretty much down the middle. And a clear majority of people said they love both of the albums. You know, some people, you know, say KK's Priest is better than what Judas Priest is doing, and then vice versa. But for the most part, it's split down the middle. And the best part about that is that now we have two great bands making classic sounding heavy metal albums. And it doesn't get much better than that. It really does not. Again, I've been critical of Judas Priest in the past for things they have done, like the, you know, proposed one guitar player on stage on tour BS, or the fact that they did not acknowledge Tim Ripper Owens, or really they don't acknowledge the fact he was even in the band. But I gotta give credit where credit is due. Judas Priest put out a phenomenal record. One of the best albums I've ever heard by them. And one of the best albums of the year, and an album of the year candidate. Hands down. Credit where credit is due, folks. I'll criticize people and criticize things where I feel the criticism is needed. I will also give credit where credit is due. That's all I have to say. Let me know your thoughts on the album. Do you like Invincible Shield? And how do you compare it to the other albums Judas Priest has put out? With that being said, thanks for watching. Stay metal.